are joined once again by a guest who's creeping himself up into rarefied air in terms of number of times that he's been on the show. Rev the Problem Koka is coming back. If you're watching the video, you won't be able to see his beautiful face like normal, but we will be getting the Problems MMA opinions because we've been slacking on covering UFC first and foremost. I'm just going to get that out of the way. But now Rev is taking time away. He is also, if you want to check out some of his content, he's been writing for bellyupsports.com, been doing a lot of different pieces on the Steelers. And we were talking a little bit about some of the things he has planned. But Rev, thank you for coming back onto the show and getting some much needed UFC talk back here on the Far End of the Bench podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me once again, Jimmy. It's been a while. I would like for the camera to be working, but I got a new laptop. But either way, I don't quite got the cool background like you, Jimmy. But either way, you can hear my voice. I think that's a little more interesting. So
it's the most important part, especially I know that the people who have heard you on our show before, seen the videos that we've posted, we basically always bring you around to talk about UFC. And they know that you know your stuff. We had one of the more major events of the recent calendar. It's been a little bit slower just with the winter, and we had that final, pretty much the who's going to go for the title shot next at the lightweight division fights. But UFC 272, what was your mindset going into the event? Did you expect big things? I know we were talking a little bit when we were setting this appearance up, but there wasn't necessarily a fight that on the card that you had to see. Was there anything that you were really looking forward to in regards to UFC 272?
the thing about like the 272 card was, well, no title shot. I mean, no title fight at the end. You kind of expect that. So there wasn't like that level of a high, but you looked up and down on the card, and even the first fight of the night with Jacoby and Aleksejczyk, it was just kind of one of those cards where you don't miss it because everything has at least something that looks fairly interesting or appetizing. So it's kind of one of those like high 7, low 8 out of 10 cards where there's enough, like if you're just a decent fan of MMA, there's enough to catch your eye, keep your attention. But like, yeah, like you said, not an extreme amount of highs or not that one fight that'll set it apart. Unless if you like listening to Masvidal and Covington, Babylon like middle schoolers. If that's what you're into, then sure, you got what you wanted.
That got rough. Those two were doing their best Conor McGregor impressions. The only bad thing is neither one of them can talk shit the way McGregor could. I think there was probably some intrigue just from the general UFC fan because Greg Hardy was on the card again, and we'll talk a little bit about it. That's going to be the first fight we get into. It's kind of like the Floyd Mayweather effect. If you put that guy on the card, people are at least going to buy it. That's why he was on the pay-per-view. It's not like he has the skills to be the opening card of a pay-per-view event of the UFC, but people are going to tune in to watch and see if he gets his ass kicked because people just don't like him. So let's talk about that fight in particular. Greg Hardy loses first round KO to punches. Sergey Spivak, who is now 14-3-0 in his UFC career, hands Greg Hardy another first round finish loss. So what is the UFC doing with this guy at this point? I think I know what they're doing, but in your mind, what do you think the UFC is going to be doing with Greg Hardy moving forward?
I feel like so far they've kept Greg Hardy around because similar to the Mayweather effect, these are guys that have had legal history to the point where people don't like them. However, just from the skill standpoint, there's just no comparison when it comes to Mayweather as a boxer to Hardy as an MMA fighter. So looking at it, that was the last bout on his current contract. They pay him quite a lot because they're like expected to make a little bit more waves. So it's like, do you want to spend what, 80 and 80 or 90 and 90 plus whatever other things they offer in the back of the locker room to a guy who clearly is just, well, sometimes he get wild on the feet, even though he's a decent striker, and he get clipped, or on the ground. Once you put him on the back, he's like a fish out of water. And it's just, how much do you really want to spend on this guy? I would not be surprised if the UFC brought him back because there are still heavyweights at the bottom end of the roster that Hardy could serve on a platter, or they could serve to him on a platter and they'll just tee him up. But with how much you're spending on him, his recent losses, the unlikeliness that he actually evolves into a decently rounded fighter. Do you want to keep that around?
It wasn't necessarily unexpected for him to be this badly. I think the UFC was kind of banking on the fact that he probably would catch somebody. Like in my mind, when they brought Greg Hardy in, when they signed him, it felt a lot to me like that Brock Lesnar move. Except when Brock Lesnar had his UFC debut, he had actually fought professionally in like legitimate organizations and absolutely dominated his opening fight against Heath Herring. With Greg Hardy, you never got that, and the UFC, I think that they're going to keep him around too. I agree with you because you can continue to serve like Sergey Spivak. Nobody knows who that is unless you're like a diehard MMA fan. But now he has a KO victory over a former NFL All-Pro, so you can kind of build him up that way. I think that he's just going to be cannon fodder for these hopefully young lions that replace the top of the heavyweight division because you mentioned it. The heavyweights are thin once you get past I'm going to say 3 or 4 because honestly, gone are the days where the heavyweight division is the most exciting division in UFC.
Yeah. I feel like with the heavyweight division, there's a little bit of width. Couple prospects coming in, Cyril Gahn, Tom Aspinall, but like we don't know how deep these guys are yet. We guys see what happens with Aspinall. Sergey Spivak so far kind of seems like a guy where decently composed guy. If you can't grapple worth a leg, he's gonna expose that. And that's what happened in the Greg Hardy fight. But yeah, the heavyweight division kind of right now just seems like place with a bit of width, a little more prospects coming in, but we don't know like are these guys legit yet? So there's kind of like question marks. And when you tune into a heavyweight bout anywhere, you can almost always that's some type of wacky sloppiness or something along those lines. So let's see who the real contenders are.
I want to see, the guys like Tai Tuivasa, who's the last person to knock out Greg Hardy. If they do, the UFC just has to kind of pull the trigger and get these heavyweights into more matchups. And actually, I think they're taking a little bit too much time to try and protect them. And there was also some matchups that they had to get out of the way before they started giving out shots to the young guys. But it almost seems like they're waiting, and they might wait too long to where they're going to have nobody at the top because I'm not quite sure what's happening with Ngannou's contract after he just defended his title the last time. But who really knows what's gonna be happening with that heavyweight division now, unless the UFC does pull the trigger and really start pushing these young guys that they have forward into bigger and better matchups.
Right. So as Fodder Jim comes in and interrupts the podcast a little bit, but yeah, the heavyweight division, it's one of those things. Just keep your eyes on it, see exactly what's set to come. It's kind of like puzzling, like who the next person is going to be. Francis Ngannou was kind of, he's definitely bargaining a lot more than a lot of your other champions. He's looking to go and box the Tyson Furies, which would be silly, but hey, he wants that chance of the payday. So who can you blame him? So yeah. Weird position to be in with your champion, asking for certain incentives into his contract that people normally don't have. And the UFC is not one that gives in too easily.
Oh, but looking at just the top 10 for the heavyweight division now, you mentioned Cyril Gahn. I mentioned Tai Tuivasa. The only other guy that I could see legitimately getting a title shot, or at least maybe earning a title shot at some point soon, it would be probably Derek Lewis, who's at number 5, maybe an Alexander Volkov, who is coming off of a win, because the UFC doesn't really like to send guys off of a loss into a title shot. But it's going to be dire trying to come up with prospects at the heavyweight division. But also on this card, it was pretty much the co-main event, the third fight, and it was at the featherweight division. Edson Barboza, who's known for having highlight reel incredible knockouts, going up against Bryce Mitchell, formerly of the Ultimate Fighter series, one of the more successful recent Ultimate Fighter competitors besides maybe Kamaru in that regard. But Edson Barboza does lose the unanimous decision to Bryce Mitchell. What did you see from Bryce Mitchell in this fight and in the fights that he's had in the UFC on this winning streak? What makes Bryce Mitchell have the ability to be at this level in the UFC at such an early point in his career? Because he hasn't been doing it a ton. He's got 16 pro fights on his record. So what's Bryce Mitchell do well?
Well, I think it's fun when a prospect is coming up. Oftentimes, you may have the guy who you like, a guy like it comes at your mind who you believe right off the bat, like, yeah, this guy's going to be legit. You kind of believe it right away. Whereas Bryce Mitchell, you know, he's got tools. You know, he's an innovative grappler. You know, he can do these things, but looking at him, he doesn't look like the most assuming person in the world. He's kind of like this tall, kind of scrawny guy, but, you know, he's Arkansas strong. He's from the country. Grappling wise, you know, once he gets you on the ground, he'll threaten submissions, has those series of twisters and rear naked chokes and arm triangles and things he goes after. And once he gets on top, he'll look to pass. Like he'll attack very aggressively, especially with the submissions. His ground and pound's getting better. And to do that against a guy in Barboza who he's not a tiny guy. He's a guy coming down from lightweight. Like he's clearly a muscular guy. Like at first I wonder how he'd even be able to make that weight. For Bryce Mitchell to basically go out there, ragdoll him the way he did, like he made a massive statement. Like, well, I thought he was like a good proficient grappler, but at a certain level would be able to shut it off. I picked Barbosa going in because of that, but the way Mitchell just went out there and made the statement, wasting no time getting into the clinch, throwing him to the ground, shooting, showing his full takedown arsenal, and then just dominating the entire fight. Like that was a statement. You gotta take notes of this guy.
Of a 15-round fight, he's credited with 11 and a half minutes of control. He threw 209 total strikes, landed 182. It just seems like, you know, he has the work rate, especially at those lighter weight divisions. He can beat the guys like Edson Barboza, who's trying to come down and maybe use his knockout power to his advantage. And you mentioned it, just being strong and tough, especially for a guy his size, it goes a long way. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, the guy that's the champion right now at 145 pounds, which is the division that Bryce Mitchell is looking to make a name in. By the way, real quickly before I continue on with that statement, do you think this moves him possibly up into the top 10 of the featherweight division? Because he hasn't actually broken the top 10 yet, rankings wise.
Wow, I haven't actually looked at the rankings, but I'm surprised there. I mean, yeah, heading into this, I think Barboza was 2-2 in the featherweight division, but that name kind of carries a certain prestige. I thought he would be launched in there, kind of in that top 10. But you look at it, I mean, I think you should make an argument for him being right outside of the top 5. Like, put him in there with your Chikadzes, your Josh Emmett's, people kind of in that top 10 range and see how he pans out. Like at this point, he's young, but clearly he's talented. I want to see where he takes this.
And in that division, like it's similar to the heavyweight division, it's one of the thinner weight classes that the UFC currently has. I mean, the guy getting the next title shot is the 9th ranked contender in the world in Chang Sung Jun, according to the ESPN rankings that they have out. And he's getting a shot at Alexander Volkanovski. And that's what I was mentioning with Volkanovski. He's a very well-rounded guy, has probably a better ground game and clinch game than he does stand-up game, but he's tough. He's very difficult to get out, and he continues with constant pressure. In the fights that I've seen Volkanovski win, it's very similar to the way that Bryce Mitchell was able to handle a guy like Edson Barboza. It is just it's strange how these rankings work. I want to figure out who just sets the final numbers, because the rankings at featherweight go Volkanovski, Holloway, AJ McKee, who's the Bellator champion. I'm fine with him being 3. Brian Ortega, Patricio Freire, Calvin Kattar, Josh Emmett. Like these are guys that should not be in the top 10 in the world. They're really only in the top 10 in the world because there's like 30 guys fighting at the featherweight, it seems like.
For me, it feels mostly that way. I mean, I'll give a little bit more credit to the featherweights, but I feel like it feels that way because Volkanovski and Holloway have kind of been around. Even when they're not fighting each other, Holloway just knocking off the next comer. Calvin Kattar, oh, you think you got some momentum? Well, not so fast. Here comes Max Holloway. Yeah, you put up a decent account for yourself, but Max showed up, put in some new wrinkles, out wrestled him a little bit, held his own on the feet. And it's just like when you have like a champion who's like sticking around, even though Volkanovski hasn't stuck around for too long, but then you got the number 1 contender who has been around for a long time and has been on those long winning streaks. taking out the best of the rest. It kind of feels like there aren't too many people. It kind of just feels like Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and everyone else.
Yeah, Holloway fights too often. He's killing the UFC's featherweight division himself because he just can't take time off. So he's continuing to knock out the contenders that could fight for the title and challenge Volkanovski. I'm thinking back to that Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo fight at featherweight. We were thinking at that time, at least I was, that the featherweight division was going to turn into what the lightweight division is now, to where it's just a sea of sharks and there's no easy fight at 155. That's what 145 was shaping up to be before Conor decided he didn't like starving himself to make featherweight after beating Jose. So it's definitely there. They have guys, especially towards the top, and Bryce Mitchell might be able to fit himself in there, similar to maybe a Corey Sandhagen, where he continues to put on these good performances, continue to win these fights, and all of a sudden you look up and he's right around that title picture. That's kind of what future I see for Bryce Mitchell. I don't know if you agree with that or if you don't.
Well, after that Barboza fight, you have to. Yeah, you can look at the rankings, but sometimes you can just ignore them. Like, just take a look at what you're seeing with your own eyes. Look at the way he's just ragdolling this man who's usually decent, like pretty solid as a defensive wrestler. I mean, outside of Mitchell, who's really taken Barboza down and held him there? Kevin Lee, Khabib, about
Yeah,
it.
those are two guys with a hell of a wrestling pedigree as well.
Yeah, so for Mitchell to do what he did while Barbosa is enjoying a hefty size advantage on the way down, like there's no way you can ignore that. Like heading into this fight, I'm like, okay, he can hold his own at top 10, but now it's like this man might be championship caliber. If Holloway and Volkanovski weren't around and the people they were, I say he could win it.
Yeah, looking at the scoring of that fight too, one judge scored it 25-30 in favor of Mitchell, another one scored it 26-30, and the final judge was 27-30. So two of the three judges had at least one 10-8 round in that fight. It wasn't a fluke. This was a true, like, normally sometimes you get the unanimous decisions where it's like a judge just has to pick a winner. This was a guy got dominated and just didn't have enough time to finish him. It seemed if that fight continued on into the quote unquote championship rounds, fourth and fifth round, Bryce Mitchell probably has a very good chance of finishing that fight. So I agree. I think that he made a huge step forward and probably one of the biggest steps forward on the entire card. And that brings us to the main event, Street Jesus and Colby Covington, former teammates, American top team, pretty much founding members of what they are today. And Colby Covington comes away with the unanimous decision, 49-46, 50-44, and 50-45. What were your thoughts of this fight? Did you agree with the unanimous decision in favor of Covington?
Yeah, you have to. Maybe you could argue round 4 where Masvidal knocked Covington down, that maybe he won it, but Covington kind of just went back on his bike, went back to doing what he did once he got his senses back, got into the clinch, and even mixed things up on the feet in that 4th round a little bit, and he held his own. That's the thing with Covington, like his striking, it looks ugly, it looks messy, it's not something you would teach people about pure fundamentals of striking, but he's consistent, he's tough. His
Works
striking,
for his style too.
Yeah,
his striking gets him close.
Yeah, it sets up his wrestling perfectly. And plus, as well as these things, I remember hearing analysts earlier this week say Colby Covington is like the bar tab at the end of the night, where it's like you order a bunch of drinks, this and that, you take your shot of this, your shot of Jack, all these things, and one by one is not a lot. But like you look at the accumulation, the tally at the end of the night, it's like, wait, I went through all that. Like he just it's just like a constant pour, just a constant just flood of just output and work, and throwing over 500 strikes in a Robbie Lawler fight and just overwhelming Masvidal. If he wasn't striking, he was setting up takedowns, get him to the ground. If he wasn't ground and pounding from on top, he would take the back and threaten these chokes that weren't close at all, but he just makes you work the whole time.
338 total strikes from Colby Covington, and he's either doing something or you're never just standing around. He's going to make you carry his weight one way or another, and I think it's because he knows that he lacks on the feet as well. He's not going to get any finishes unless he gets lucky, but he He's similar to Kamaru Usman in the way that they're both world-class wrestlers, but Kamaru is actually taking to the striking training that he's doing. I would say that Covington almost looks worse technically each time that he fights, but it's almost better. The worse that he looks on the feet, the better he is to fight. And of the two guys, I don't really like either of them. I'm not a huge fan of either of them. I'd say between the two, I would have been rooting for Jorge Masvidal. But just thinking back to last week going into the fight, it was hard for me to figure out a way, unless Jorge Masvidal was going to catch him and knock him out. And Colby Covington has never been just caught and knocked out in his career. There wasn't going to be a way for Jorge Masvidal to win this fight via decision, because he wasn't going to be able to keep his striking distance to where he could earn a ton of points on the feet. Unless he knocked out Colby Covington, Covington was going to win this fight and set himself up for, more success in the future. What do you think happens at 170? Because Covington and Usman, we've seen that movie before. Is the UFC going to maybe run that back again, or what's going on with the 170-pound weight division right now?
Funny because it feels a lot like what we were saying before, where it's like a clear Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski kind of at the top. Kind of feels like there's a clear Usman versus Covington as a 1 and 2 at welterweight. However, I would like to make an argument for a guy who could just come out of nowhere, like a Khamzat Chimaev, or a guy like a Leon Edwards or a Gilbert Burns. Both guys I think could hold their own with Covington. I'm not sure how that goes. I could imagine a situation, a scenario where a guy like Leon Edwards, who's as disciplined as Masvidal, but isn't going to just sit back up against the fence and kind of just entertain the grappling as much as someone like Masvidal will, maybe going out faring better against a guy like Covington. So one of the frustrating things I feel like about welterweight is there are decent guys and contenders here and there, but oftentimes they don't end up fighting each other. Colby Covington, before the Usman fight and the Masvidal fight, he got the title shot off of beating a pretty shot Tyron Woodley. You got Leon Edwards kind of sitting around periods of inactivity. Gilbert Burns is asking for people. He might get a Chimaev fight now. Gilbert Burns, you can tell he's frustrated looking for fights sometimes. And it's there are good welterweights, but it's I feel like there are gaps where these guys just don't fight each other. And it's quick, just get off of Twitter and fight each other already.
Something like that, especially I remember I've seen Vicente Luque fight. I've seen Bilal Muhammad fight, but it's been a while and it hasn't been against anybody significant. Those are fights. If Vicente Luque truly is your number 5 ranked welterweight in the world, let's have him fight Leon Edwards and see. Maybe that could be a title eliminator. Yeah. Just because you got to start figuring out who's going to compete against Kamaru. Is anybody going to beat the Nigerian Nightmare? Probably not, because Kamaru Usman looks like he just continues to get better and better. And the fact that he's able to win title fights, not being able to run, his cardio is strictly bike-based because his knees are so shot. I don't think that there's a way to actually beat Kamaru Usman unless you put his lights out. So whether or not they're going to be finding a guy to beat him, find a guy to compete with him, or at least find a new name to put in the octagon and give me a new meal that Kamaru Usman gets to eat at 170, if nothing else. Give me the 5th and 3rd guys fighting each other, and let's start eliminating who the other top contenders are. Because we know about Covington, we know about Usman, maybe a little bit about Gilbert Burns, but I think you're right. We probably need to see a little bit more from him. The last fight that Gilbert Burns had, he beat a old Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Wonder Man Thompson, in July of 2021. That's the last fight that he's had. Been very inactive. Welterweight in general has been pretty inactive as a whole.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I said, at this point, we've seen the tweeting, we've seen the everybody's ducking me, yada, yada, yada. But I'd like to see something come out, maybe some prospects who come out of nowhere. That's always great. Outside of Chimaev, there's Chimaev and then there's Sean Brady, who won against Michael Chiesa last year. I wonder if he's ready for the jump. He's very physically strong. I don't think he has a wrestling background, but his wrestling looks pretty solid. His grappling game has a series of chokes he could go to. So there's 2 surefire prospects who I look at right now, and it's oh yeah, these guys could be top 10, top 5 guys. Maybe Rachmanov too. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Shavkat Rachmanov. I could maybe like send you. I know it's a harder name to spell, so I'll send that to you later. He's another interesting guy. He's had 3 fights in the UFC. He's looked all right, but it's like that's a thing that keeps the weight division healthy. You need prospects coming in at all times, and not just prospects who look all right and then all of a sudden like it's like a flash in the pan. But like you need those guys to push out the old. Like the young has got to beat the old.
Yeah, it's strangely been one of the ever since they added in the lightweights and lower, what 170 has kind of been the try it out, I would say, almost weight class. I know that CM Punk was at 85, right? He wasn't actually
Well, he was at 70. He was
yeah,
at
so
70.
that's what I mean. Like that, this is the weight class where you either have Kamaru Usman, who's a world class fighter that could probably be, I think he might be top of the pound for pound list, and then you have a guy like Phil Brooks, CM Punk fighting some part time photographer, part time MMA fighter at the 170-pound division. You're like, you want me to take this seriously, but you keep
Oh,
giving me this to watch. I
wait,
can't
did you
take.
hear that guy's actually going to get another fight though? I think he's like, yeah, Mike Jackson.
Yeah.
I remember just randomly looking at the UFC recent signings, and they signed this Irish guy to fight Mike Jackson. It's like, we're doing this again. Like I'm
Whatever
sure.
happened to Mickey Gall? That's what I want to know. I thought that he was going to actually do something after choking out CM Punk.
I believe he moved up to middleweight. Like he's had bits and flashes of success. Like he's improving. He's looking like a better striker. But there's still certain situations where you put him up against a physically strong powerhouse like Mike Perry, and he gets flung around. He could get outclassed by better, more experienced strikers. One of the issues was his cardio. Remember the Diego Sanchez fight? He got dragged into deeper waters after having early success and just got beat up on the ground. So he's just got his issues. Maybe he's just not going to be the guy who maybe the UFC was hoping he was going to be, but he's still there. He still got a job. He still wins sometimes. So that's not horrible.
Yeah, it's just, it seems like 170 might be one of those weight classes where you can almost maybe consider, is it necessary? Do we need a 170-pound division, or can these people, it is a little bit of an in-between between middleweight and lightweight. So I don't know. There's got to be something that they can do to kind of cultivate some more competition at the top. I think that they probably have a few weight divisions that they could say that about. But overall, you said that you rated it an 8 out of 10. Do you have a favorite moment from the card? Favorite fight that you watched? What was the problems fight of the night from UFC 252 or 272?
Well,
Wow.
well, in terms of fight of the night, you have to look at that last fight on the last fight of the prelim, which was basically a number one contender women's strawweight fight between Marina Rodriguez and Yan Xiaonan. Very back and well, maybe not back and forth, but it was one of those things where Zhao Nan, the Chinese fighter, came out very quick, showed to be the faster fighter, had the faster hands, looked good on a counter. But as the fight went on, Rodriguez was able to rally in the second half, keep up a pace that Zhao Nan was able to keep up with, and just was able to nab a very close split decision that was very back and forth on. It was like one of those situations where it was like the faster starter won round one, the one who finished better won round three, and you could debate who won round two because that was kind of the close round. So one of those fights, Marina Rodriguez might be facing a winner of Esparza and Rose Namajunas. So let me clear my throat, but yeah, she'll be fighting a winner of Namajunas Esparza. Lost a close decision to Esparza, so that would be a rematch in case she won that. So one of the more exciting things that happened. Another thing was Marina Moroz, who was a Ukrainian fighter, winning a fight by the second round by submission, and kind of saw her getting emotional afterwards. And funny thing, heading into the fight, there was like this little conflict beef between the opponent she was fighting, but it was cool to see them throw that aside because, well, there's war going on right now. Like people's families are in a bad situation in Ukraine. Like a little fight beef is nothing. Just throw it aside. And also, she was able to pick up a win. The country, the Ukrainian and Marina Moroz. So that was also something cool to see.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the implications that conflict would have had in a sport that's so internationally recognized as the UFC. I'm sure that I know that there are boxers that are Ukrainian. I know Lomachenko went over there, as well as the Klitschko brothers and Alexander Olsik. So it's good to see something positive come out of at least something related to Ukraine, whether it be a small UFC victory or something like that. It was at least something positive, which is more than we can say for the next topic of discussion. Moving on from the past weekend's event, there was another major piece of news for the UFC. Former heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez was arrested on February 28th. The charge against him is attempted homicide. He was arrested after allegedly chasing down the man who is being charged for molesting a young relative of Cain Velasquez. He shot a gun into the vehicle of the perpetrator, and per the Santa Clara County District Attorney, another man in the vehicle, who actually was the offender's stepfather, was hit by one of the gunshots in his arm and torso, but suffered non-life-threatening injuries. First off, that is never a story, a topic of discussion when children are involved, especially in a situation like that. That's bad enough. Now, also reports are coming out of the Santa Clara County DA's office that he's going to be denied bail. Cain Velasquez will not be allowed to be sent home on bail and will be in custody until he's able to have his trial at his hearing with his lawyers. But strange decisions, I guess, all the way around, starting with the fact that this disgusting human being was preying on a relative of Cain Velasquez. Velasquez going ballistic and doing what I think a lot of people can maybe see themselves doing in that situation, but now being held at a totally different standard of the law. It just seems like a totally, Cain Velasquez had a rough end to his UFC career, and this doesn't make this doesn't make it look any better for him moving forward in his post-fight career.
Well, to say one thing first, there are allegations. However, when you just looked at the strange nature of the situation where this person who has allegedly hundreds of cases of, child molestation, and this person is supposed to be working in a daycare for children, someone who you're supposed to be able to trust with your child. The fact that he has hundreds of these alleged cases is just, and the fact that he's the one that's free and is able to roam around in California, whereas Cain Velasquez right now got denied bail. Like, it's strange, especially, I mean, yeah, I understand that there are technicalities and that there are consequences. He did shoot the wrong person. He did drive his car recklessly. Like, who knows? What if instead of ramming into that car, he rammed into some innocent person minding their own business? What if he crashed into someone else? What if the gun shot and hit someone way halfway across the street? And it's reckless. So yeah, speaking about it, he deserves something because as bad as it was, it could have gone worse. But also going back to the situation, you gotta feel bad for the things that triggered Cain to do what he did, and the fact that his daughter got put in this horrible situation. So you just kind of gotta hope for the best for the Velasquez family, the wife, the kids, and just hope that they're doing okay. I hope Cain holds his head. It's cool to see the MMA community kind of come and support. Derek Brunson's been raising money and selling merchandise for the Velasquez family. So it's cool to see some solidarity with just an overall horrible situation where you have to wonder if they offered the rightful punishment and if they actually kept this person, denied the bail and made sure that they actually gave him the rightful punishment. None of this would have happened in the first place. So it's sad.
Yeah, it almost seems like it could have been avoided. I agree with that outlook on it. It's unfortunate because the charge that he was arrested for, the attempted homicide, carries a possibility of 20 plus years in jail. I don't think that he's going to be sentenced to 20 years in jail, but that sequence of events, can I sit here honestly and put myself in Cain Velasquez's shoes and say that I wouldn't do something similar, or at least feel the urge to do something similar in that situation? No, I can't sit here and say I probably wouldn't be have the feeling to do something similar, But ramming the car, if it was just going out and shooting at who you believe was the offender, I could maybe see that being argued as just a moment of a crime of passion. The ramming the car and chasing the guy down and then firing the weapon, there's too much that went on to not to let him go scot-free. Cain Velasquez is going to serve some time for what he did. I really just hope that I know the scales of justice are supposed to be balanced and everything. I hope that they're at least somewhat empathetic for the situation that happened that caused all of this, because let's not forget, none of this would be happening if there wasn't a predator that was allowed to work with underage children who already had a history of this, allegedly. Um, this is a totally avoidable situation. And right now it's impacting the victims' lives. It's impacting Velasquez's family. So it is a terrible thing to do. And forgive my ignorance, Derek Brunson's the fighter that had his stepdaughter that was abducted and murdered, correct?
That was actually Walt Harris.
Oh, okay. I couldn't remember. I know that there was another fighter that had unfortunately a similar situation happened to him.
Yeah, I believe there was a law that got passed, like Anaya's law involving that child, Anaya Blanchard, who was abducted and killed. But going back to the Velasquez situation, I do agree. I kind of hope that the case is a little bit more lenient, that an emotional appeal could be made where it's like, if that was your son or if that was your daughter this happened to, like, what would you do? Whereas that's a very valid emotional appeal that could be bought. But basing it off of the language in which they're using, I feel like they're going to be hard on Velasquez, considering you looked at the quotes and they're saying Velasquez is a threat to the citizens of, I believe, Santa Barbara, wherever it happened. It said that he was a threat to the citizens living there. But then you got to sit back and think, like, the person who allegedly had all these allegations against all these children, that person is not dangerous to the community, but Cain Velasquez is. So I feel like they're not going to be very easy on him, but I hope they are.
Yeah, the attorney that Velasquez is going with is Mark Garagos. And the ESPN article that I'm looking at here says that he's also represented Michael Jackson, Chris Brown, and Scott Peterson. And the quote that he had
heard he also heard he also was a lawyer for Colin Kaepernick as well in the whole NFL situation, just adding to it. But yeah, keep going.
His quote from the courtroom today: "Is there anybody out there who would say to a father that this is not what you should do? Is there anybody out there who finds it beyond the pale that a father was not consulted when they released the perpetrator back into the public with $0 bail, yet they're holding Cain to no bail? This is why people are disgusted, and rightfully so, with the criminal justice system." So the attorney has, Velasquez's attorney has set his stake in the ground, and this is going to be the argument that they're trying to move forward with. It's just kind of up in the air now to see, is California going to be as they usually are with criminals and be super lenient and let basically anybody with a past walk free, or are they going to hold Cain Velasquez to a different standard because he is a UFC fighter? That was one thing that I was hearing today. Why have the gun? If you're Cain Velasquez, formerly the baddest man on the planet and the heavyweight champion of the UFC, once considered the greatest heavyweight in the sport, why are you bringing a gun? You could do just as much damage as you want if you just, find that guy yourself. I'm not advocating that he should have done that. That's another thing that you got to think about too. Like, Velasquez did make the situation worse with what he decided to do and how he reacted to the feeling that he had in that situation. So it's going to be something that I guess we have to pay attention to, unfortunately, for the upcoming future, and figure out what's going to happen. But it is a sad state of affairs. And it is, like, I agree with you. It's nice to see the UFC community and the MMA community as a whole stand up behind the guy that was so important to the sport and had such a long and storied career. So that was unfortunate for MMA. Outside of all of that news and the bad things going on, we are getting to the point of the calendar where MMA events are going to start heating up. July, International Fight Week. So, Rev, I got to ask, what are your expectations for the MMA world moving forward into the spring and the summer?
Well, looking at the summer, there is this Irish man somewhere around there fighting at 155. I don't know if you know his name, but still rehabbing from an injury, saying that maybe he could begin his training this month or April. We'll be ready for a fight in June or July. So, considering International Fight Week is always in July, don't be fully surprised if you see Conor McGregor somewhere in there. I know Israel Adesanya after the Whitaker fight said he also wanted to have a fight in the summer, but that's something you got to look forward to. I'm not always the best when it comes to looking at the future cards because there's so much going on a week to week basis in MMA. That's like sometimes fights just sneak up on you. Like I looked at the card this week and I remember I was like, wait, is Michael Johnson fighting or wait, that fight got pulled off? It's like there's so much going on. You don't know who's fighting until like days before. So but yeah, those are a couple things to look for in the summer. There's probably going to be a Conor McGregor fight if he's healthy. If he's actually taking the proper steps to rehab from that awkward knee injury suffered in a Poirier fight. Don't be surprised if you see him in July. Israel Adesanya wants to fight in July. Jared Cannonier came off a impressive win, so they'll probably match those guys up against each other. But besides that, want to see some cool stuff. Maybe I don't know if they're going back to Brazil in May. Maybe there are rumors there, but decent fights in the summer. International Fight Week, they always try to stack up. So kind of hope it's just another one of those typical years.
Yeah, the one that I'm seeing just on the schedule right now, May 7th, UFC 274, Oliveira Gaethje. To see who's going to reign atop that 155 pound division or if it's going to be a rotating platter. And that's actually at the Footprint Center in Phoenix where the Suns play. So that's one of the bigger events that's on the calendar, at least for the near future. Also the Volkanovski Korean Zombie UFC 273. So there's a couple pay-per-views before we actually get into June and July. We'll probably have to have you back on around that Oliveira Gaethje fight, whether it's before or after, because that's going to be huge and it has seismic impacts, especially with that one Irish fighter who still is not in retirement and could possibly rehab in enough time to come back and fight in July. It might have something to do with who he's fighting. But Rev, I can't thank you enough for jumping on and talking a little bit of UFC with us on the far end of the bench. Real quickly, before we let you go, tell the people listening where they can read your work for Belly Up Sports.
Good to be back with the bench Good to be back with the bench warmer. So thanks for having me. But yeah, you can find myself on Belly Up Sports. You want to chat it up with me or talk about my unpopular opinions? It's at Rev Koka, REVKOKA on Twitter. And yeah, writing plenty of articles on Belly Up Sports. Just search my name, Rev Koka. You'll find it there. Planning on writing something football related about the Pittsburgh Steelers and how maybe they should approach that number one draft pick, just the many different ways that they could do it and my thoughts on it. And I'll have that article out. I'll have that article out shortly. I'm struggling. I'm stumbling my way to the finish line right now, but I'm trying my on this.
It's good. You're out of practice. It's been, we got to figure out a way to have you more on the show on a more consistent basis. But this is also a good time to mention you will be joining myself when the RMAC season comes back, my Top of the Mountain podcast, where we look over we do a game of the week every week for the RMAC football schedule, as well as look at the rankings. Rev is going to come on and has agreed to be my co-host in the fall. So you'll have plenty more practice being on podcasts and your voice will be in a lot better shape during that time. And I'm looking forward to that. So the Top of the Mountain podcast, be on the lookout, watch for Rev's articles jumping up on Belly Up. And then when football season rolls around, we'll have more stuff with him and myself on the Top of the Mountain podcast, talking all things Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference football. Rev, thank you very much for coming on, and hopefully you stay safe. Keep doing good work over at Belly Up, and we'll keep in touch.
Yep, you two keep on grinding. You're all over the place doing the basketball commentary, doing this, so just keep up the work.
Definitely. Thank you. See ya.
Yep, see ya.